Matchmaker.fm connects podcasters and guests. Welcome to Matched, the show where we talk to some of the most incredible guests available for an interview right now. I'm your host, James Mulvany, founder of Matchmaker.fm, and this is Matched. Hey, Aaron, welcome to Matched. How's it going?
Going well. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. So, just before we get into things, a couple of icebreakers for you. If you could choose one decade, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, which do you think is the coolest? And if you could go back to one of them, which would you choose and why?
Absolutely 1984. 1980s, because my venture firm is called 1984. I was also born in 1980 and love the movies.
Yeah. Kind of retro, lots of neon signs going on.
That's right. I'd say that, a lot of the best movies from the last 50 years came out of the 80s. Right now I'm watching Cobra Kai on Netflix, and that's based off of the original Karate Kid, which was also made in the 1980s. So it's just one of a series of fantastic films, Back to the Future, etc., that came out of the 80s, and they just don't make films quite the way that they did in that decade anymore.
I agree. Yeah, it would be cool to go back in the past to the 80s and then live in one of those films, I think. Next up, what is the favorite thing that you've bought this year? I think a lot of people have bought some kind of cool stuff during lockdown. Have you bought anything that's really interesting or been really useful?
I don't know if I can point to anything particularly exciting that I've purchased. I sold a house and I've rented this place because I had child number 2 back in April and needed a little bit more space.
Congratulations.
So, I suppose it's not buying but renting, and I'm fairly happy with this now that I'm able to go back outside and there's no smoke in the air.
That's cool. So it's kind of like a lifestyle change.
That's right. It's nice having kind of a little bit more of a yard now that I'm able to use it again. Awesome.
Cool. Okay, so let's get into things. It says on your profile that you're the sort of one of 40 top VCs under 40. So I'm curious to begin with, how do you become a venture capitalist at under 40?
Yeah, so I started out as a entrepreneur. So moved out to the Bay Area about 12 years ago after business school, worked briefly in product management, did this kind of wacky thing called fantasy politics ahead of the 2012 election to get young people more involved in politics, and didn't really work. The goal was to get young people off of the periphery, and instead we ended up getting older people who were already spending 2 hours a day on CNN and Fox News to spend 4 hours a day on it. But it was a fun ride. Then started something called PathSource, which is basically a company that enabled people to figure out what career they wanted to go into, show them the school educational path to get there. That got acquired by Academics Direct back in March 2017. And then, at that point, I came on board with the company that acquired us, but it was really looking for kind of a new adventure. And a good friend and mentor of mine, a guy named Rami Adib, who had sort of informally advised me on the tail end of my last company. He was starting in 1984 and said, "Hey, why don't you come on board and give this a try?" And I did, and haven't looked back. It's proven to be an exceptionally fulfilling ride.
Great. And so for those people who are watching who perhaps don't know about 1984, can you explain about what you do and the kind of investments that you make?
Yeah, sure. So 1984 is a seed stage venture capital firm based here in San Francisco that invests in companies that are using software to tackle kind of unsexy and antiquated industries. So think things like automating residential real estate appraisals, Airbnb for warehousing. If it gets everybody really excited, we're probably not interested. And so we're coming in very early when there's 2, 3, 4, 5 people and writing first checks. Often these are around $500,000 checks. We're often leading or co-leading those rounds. not taking board seats, and then working closely with the portfolio companies and with the entrepreneurs to help them really get off the ground and get to a good Series A.
And what do you think? What do you look for when you kind of go for investments? And you mentioned that obviously you're not kind of chasing, like a lot of companies will go after the latest AI thing or like the latest app for your iPhone, but you go after sort of traditional industries that have perhaps been neglected in terms of technology, and you kind of go after companies that are fulfilling kind of clear gaps in those markets, do you?
That's right. It's really software plays, and at a high level, what we're looking for are companies that are solving a screaming need for some type of a customer, and usually that's an enterprise customer, but not universally. And then we're looking at kind of team, market, product in that order. So we're looking for phenomenal teams that are going after massive markets with compelling products. And if we see somebody who falls into that category, we're probably going to sit down with them.
Okay, cool. And so let's talk about podcasting now. I'm curious to know what first got you interested in podcasts and why you wanted to become a guest on podcasts.
Yeah. So when you think about sort of the job of a venture capitalist, a big part of it is to see everything. Really make sure that you've got visibility across the spectrum into the businesses that are getting started in areas that interest you. And there's at the highest level, two parts to that. One is going out and banging down doors, and the other part of that is having other people come and bang down your door. So getting on podcasts is part of having people come bang down my door as we kind of get the message out there that what we're investing in. And frankly, there's a lot of people who want to invest in the hot new thing, which these days is like remote work is sort of the new cryptocurrency. But there's not that many folks who want to invest in the next company that's disrupting port operations or doing something, really kind of uncool in an antiquated industry. And so I love getting on podcasts like yours to get that type of word out.
And what sort of what's your strategy been to approaching podcasts? Are you going after a specific type of podcaster? What sort of a podcast have you been on so far?
Yeah, so I've been on a few podcasts through that I connected with through your network, and it's which, by the way, the platform is phenomenal. I've found it exceptionally helpful, and so at a high level, I'm interested, I think, in podcasts that are targeted towards venture capitalists, targeted towards entrepreneurs, and targeted towards those who are thinking about going down either of those roads, either investing or starting a company. I think all of those kind of fall within the bucket.
Okay, cool. And if you could choose to have anyone on your podcast, or if you could be on any podcast in the world, which would it be?
Yeah, sure. So, I don't have the wide angle lens that you do on podcasts. And I was recently on a podcast again that I matched through your network called Run With It. That was a ton of fun. And in terms of ones that I would love to get connected with, I was just taking a look at a podcast called Venture Briefs the other day that, just talked with a range of different venture capitalists about their roles, and looked very interesting. So I think that probably ranks fairly high on my list today.
Okay, cool. And so specifically podcasts that are focused on interviewing VCs then.
Yeah, I think that's very much a good fit, as well as podcasts that are helping entrepreneurs kind of think about what they want to build. And that podcast that I just mentioned, Run With It, I thought was a very clever approach. Effectively, what they do is they bring on folks who have a business idea but aren't going to pursue it themselves, and really work through that idea on the podcast. And at the end of it, different listeners can sort of call in and or contact the podcast and potentially have the ability to talk with the person who was getting interviewed and really bounce ideas around for how that business idea could work, which I thought was kind of a phenomenal approach. And while I have not yet found anyone who is actually pursuing that idea, which was a sort of tech-enabled staffing company, I'm still hopeful that we'll see a couple of folks who end up coming to us with it.
I think you make a really valid point there, and you're saying that to create a good podcast, it's about creating engagement with the audience. And by the sounds of it, that podcast you've just mentioned, they've done a really good process in terms of actually giving people the ability to communicate, like having this two-way thing versus just preaching a word to the world. I think actually being able to accept feedback from people or take questions is really, really important.
That's exactly right. And when you think about kind of what works best for a podcast, I think that it's really the same as business, right? It's coming up with something that really solves somebody's problem, that fits a niche that a particular audience segment is looking for, and that nobody else is really addressing for them in a good way.
Cool. Okay. And just to finish up then, if you could give some advice to someone who's looking at starting appearing on podcasts as a guest like you're doing, what advice would you give?
Well, so it's going back to my last answer, it would really be to seek out your niche, right? So podcasting, and I'm the farthest thing from an expert in podcasting, but from what I've seen, it certainly seems as though it's about finding a underserved niche that well, ideally that you're able to get great content and great interviewees for, and really service that niche better than anybody else out there.
Awesome. And to finish up, Aaron, if people want to find out more about you, if they want to get in touch, how can they reach out?
They can best probably reach out to me on LinkedIn. You just search for Aaron Michael and 1984 Ventures, and I'll come right up. That's the easiest way. Or you can reach out to team@1984.vc.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There is an easier way to get booked onto more podcasts as a guest. Join matchmaker.fm for free today and start making connections with podcasters who are looking for guests just like you.